Today, we are talking about unmasking corporate strategies for LGBTQ communities. And I'm really excited to welcome our group of panelists today, amazing people from all over the country, which is always fun in these conversations. So I want to start by asking them to introduce themselves a little bit. And then I will come back and take a moment to introduce you more about Outcare Health, and then we'll continue with the conversation. So for panelists, I'd like you to maybe share a little bit about who you are, what you're currently doing, and your bonus question, since we just had the spring equinox, what is your favorite season of the year? So with that said, I think Mario, I'm going to throw this one to you. So why don't we get started?
Thank you. The last shall be first. I'm the baby of 14 kids, so that's my fun fact. And I was last in that sense. But right now, I lead the U.S. Business Action to End HIV, which is a coalition of impactful companies thinking about their unique capabilities, resources, infrastructure, and influence that they can wield to help end the domestic HIV epidemic. As we all know, HIV is an issue that intersects with a lot of different communities, and specifically the LGBTQ plus community and all of the different spectrums that exist in that community or in this community, as I am an LGBTQ plus community member myself. So I'm really excited to be here today. My favorite season is summer because that's when I get to have all the fun after doing all the work all year long. Usually find some time to make a vacation. A trip over to Europe is usually one of my favorite things to do during the summertime. So I'd have to say summer.
Nice. Thank you so much. Megan.
Thank you so much, John. So my name is Megan Gaffney. I go by she, her pronouns. I am the founder and CEO of Veda Data Solutions. We're an AI company that helps health plans provide information that allows patients to get access to the appropriate healthcare providers. And we're actually a partner with Outcare on their outlist and helping the outlist get as much possible visibility in the community as we can. I want to say a special thanks to you, John. I've been reading your book. I am the mom of an LGBTQ kiddo, and they're a teenager. So you can imagine I need all the help I can get, but really appreciate your focus on kids. And my favorite season is also summer. I'm a Leo, so I don't think I really have a choice. We're bred to be in the sunshine and like to spend some time with my kids in that time of year. So thanks for letting us join today.
And Robert.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Very excited to be here. My name is Rob D'Annabelle. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am currently the head of corporate strategy and corporate development at Forge Health. Forge Health is a one-stop shop for behavioral health. And so we provide outpatient behavioral health services to all populations. And one of our specialty programs include the LGBTQ plus community. Previously, I've worked both at Jefferies and SVB Securities, covering the healthcare industry in investment banking. And my favorite season, I'm going to say it as well, but summer. I am an outdoor person, love gardening, love being outdoors. I'll just have to wrap it up with summer there.
Thank you. Once again, my name is John Sovek, and I'm a therapist out here in Pasadena, California. And as Megan alluded to, I'm also the author of Out, a parent's guide to supporting your LGBTQIA plus kid through coming out and beyond. And I specialize in working with families and their kids during the coming out process. So it's a really beautiful passion that I found over time. And I've been connected with Outcare Health for, I think, almost 3.5 years now. And there really is some amazing work that they do in the community. And right now, especially, this is LGBTQ Health Awareness Week. I think this is a really powerful time for us to all be coming together for these conversations so that through the work of Outcare Health and other organizations, we can break down barriers and build a healthier, more inclusive health system for all. If you, as a listener with us today, are looking to maybe be trained into being a community health worker, Outcare and our partners at Pear Suite, they've got some spaces where you can learn online, you can get certified, and you might even be eligible for a stipend during this process. You can look at the website outcarehealth.org/CHW to learn a little bit more about that process. And as always, we encourage everyone to sign up for OutCare Health's ongoing support groups each month. We have a Latinx group, we have a gender diverse communities group, and an LGBTQ plus Black communities group as well. You can find out about those groups at outcarehealth.org/outreach. And if you have ideas for other groups that we might be able to create for support as well, we'd always welcome those. So coming to our subject at hand today, the corporate community and the LGBTQ community have had an interesting relationship over time. And I'd be curious to see and hear from all of you about what do you observe in the community, the corporate relationship with LGBTQ support, and how that has either changed or how it has remained the same over time, and what you see currently in that relationship. So we're really looking at what are corporations doing to be part of, supportive of the LGBTQ community. And Robert, I'm going to start with you on this, and if you're okay.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, John. It's a great topic and so important, right? For me personally, I came out later in life. And one of the things that I personally had to deal with was, how do I come out to my peers, my colleagues at work without making it the awkward conversation, right? And when I was first onboarded at my first job, one of the trainings that we took was an online training about harassment in the workplace. And they lumped in cultural competency around LGBTQ plus individuals, BIPOC individuals into this sexual harassment training. And it made me feel so uncomfortable that this is how my colleagues were being trained on working with individuals a part of this community. And now, fast forward years into sort of my career, one of the things that I really love about Forge Health, where I currently work, is that we have created dedicated trainings to the LGBTQ plus community. And not only does it go into specific details about how to work properly with this community as, say, a social worker or a clinician, but also as a colleague in the workplace, and how to craft certain types of questions and commentary that creates this inclusive environment so that individuals like myself don't have to second guess or take a step back about something that we might say or might do that will send off alarms. Oh, Rob's gay, and the whispers around the office. No, it's been a totally different experience at Forge because the company has taken a true step in building this as a part of their culture. So as you were initially onboarding and even before onboarding in the interview process, we make it known that we support everyone, especially members of the LGBTQ plus community. So I think in summary, making it a pillar of your organization's culture, but also how that impacts not only clients, but also employees, even at the start of, say, an interview process, all the way through potentially them leaving the company. This has to be looked at from a wholesome perspective. And I really am honored again to be working at Forge, who takes this very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Megan?
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree with everything that Robert said about training and inclusiveness from the moment of your first conversation with a potential employee throughout all of the life changes that happen as your employees grow with you, whether it's big life events like weddings or engagements and celebrating those publicly as a part of the community, being able to ensure that our benefits are speaking to the unique needs of every employee that we have. And then I also think about it from a product perspective. We work in healthcare data and thinking about bias in the products that we're making and being thoughtful about ensuring that our products are inclusive and they're speaking to the widest breadth of consumers that our data might touch. And so that's being intentional, and also from my seat as a leader, really learning to listen as there are changing issues that we need to tackle in healthcare every day, and ensuring that we're staying out in front and making sure that patients have the information they need to get care. And that means all patients for all potential needs that they have. I think it's important for corporate leaders to really pay attention to being proactive.
Mhm. And Mario.
Yeah, I'm going to take the question and take the risk as well as sounding like a serial optimist. But I think progress isn't linear. And so when I say that and I think about where we are right now in relation to pinkwashing and all of these things, I think there has to be a certain level of opposition in order to propel us forward so that we understand where there's still opportunities for growth. And I think when we think about why business exists to make money, they exist to provide an infrastructure, they exist to keep our economy moving and to allow people opportunities to live out the lives that they want to live, et cetera, et cetera. Inside of that, though, are mechanisms for corporate and social responsibility, which cross these lines of intersection that we're talking about right now. And I have the incredible opportunity to work with a number of prominent companies, large companies, medium-sized companies, small companies, who are a part of our coalition, our business coalition, to end the HIV epidemic, and are really focusing on driving actions that are committed, that relative goals can be placed around to make sure that they're measurable and that they're specific and that they're achievable and time bound. And we provide a report card on those things, right? And so when we think about the current status of rainbow washing or pink washing or however you want to look at it today, I do think that we're living in some volatile times as it relates to political climate and just polarization of ideals in the world. And so business has to respond to those things in real time, right? And they have to appease a lot of different audiences. And so I think our opportunity is thinking about what ideas we can create, what collaborations we can create, how can we make it more agreeable, amenable for these companies to take on these issues that impact marginalized communities and vulnerable communities. And that's what I'm really proud of the work that we've done, is we've made it actionable, we've made it accessible for companies to still be able to do the work and blend in a business case for them to be able to do it so that they can not only support the communities that need to support, but they can continue to drive innovation within their business models as well. So
I think we have an interesting point going here. We have both internal conversations and external conversations that we're talking about with this really big subject today. And I want to just grab hold of Mario's thought about this external facing piece of companies. I think that relationship started a long time ago with alcohol companies stepping in during Pride Month and suddenly supporting all the bars in the LGBTQ community, to nowadays where we have national sports companies using out athletes as part of their spokes team. We have beer companies using trans people. We have entertainment companies speaking out against some of the policies that are happening at a state level. The thing that I'm finding is there's an interesting balance, though, of where it's being put out there, and then when there's any negative response, it's immediately being shut down. And I'd be curious about your thoughts about how do companies make this external message? How can they do it effectively, or what you've seen in the community yourself?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. John, I think two things are important. One, that the company's activism isn't reductive, right? Where you're just reducing all of your activism to 1 month and changing the colors of your logo, and then not speaking out when a governor or legislature in your state is doing something that makes your employees feel unsafe. And I don't actually find it that difficult to speak out publicly, because companies have to think about their customers, but they also have to think about the talent that they have internally and the wide breadth of talent that you need to attract to be an innovative leader in your business. And doing things internally that make your employees feel included, and then abandoning them in the public sphere, in their community when they leave work, when they're not feeling included in those spaces and threatened in a lot of ways, I don't think you earn a lot of loyalty doing that. And so as business leaders are thinking about how can you be more outspoken and take advantage of your privilege as a leader to have both a platform and has some protection from the challenges that you might face in the public sphere, using that platform to speak out on behalf of your employees and make their community a safe place for them to both live and work, I think is something that more and more business leaders are coming around to seeing. That becomes a talent retention and attraction issue. And if you're doing the right thing for your employees in the community as well as your company, you're going to get better people. And that becomes a business case that I think people are starting to pay attention to.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would add to that, Megan. When I coached basketball, I would always tell the kids that I was coaching, know your why. Know why you decided to run from point A to point B, or why you decided to pass instead of shoot, right? And I think if companies would commit to that, knowing why they are engaging to begin with, and then having a clear communication strategy internally and externally to serve as tent poles and support the ideology behind them engaging in the first place, then when they're met with that opposition, then there won't be a need to crumble and just have everything dissipate in front of them, and then not have a leg to stand on with the community or with their employees or with their supporters, whoever it is, their investors, wherever it is, right? And so I think that's probably where the failure exists, is there's not a clear communication plan, strategy, and the companies don't know why they're doing it to begin with. And so if that's clearly communicated internally, externally, I think there's a better chance for success.
No, and I just jumping in here too, I completely agree with Megan and Mario. They bring up a great point in figuring out the why. And I think once you have that why, right, in that connection to the LGBTQ plus community, both internally and externally, and when Megan said, right, in a climate now where you see some of the backlash during Pride Month for sponsoring LGBTQ plus events or changing your logo, when organizations figure out the why, you start to see those organizations become more dedicated to the community year round. And in doing so, it allows for that negative press, that negative feedback to subside. Because during Pride Month, it gears everyone up for those who may be discriminatory or prejudiced. They know that it's coming up. They know that a lot of organizations are going to start to advertise or market to our community. And why I think this is such an important topic of pinkwashing is because once a company understands that they just can't slap a logo onto their website and say that we are affirming, we're supportive, and then they start to deal with the backlash, it starts to dilute the message of what Pride Month really is about. And organizations that are dedicated to our community and our cause year round is super, super important, because you start to see that pullback in some of that negative press that leads up into Pride Month. But then also it allows us to divert resources away from organizations that are pinkwashing and pour them into companies that have really answered that question that Mario said, why, have shown their support to the community, and funnel those resources into these organizations that have built a foundational system to support this community.
When addressing what Robert was just saying, this idea of the kickback from people who oppose the well-being of the LGBTQ community, see, that was said very politely, is that there are companies. There's a major retailer that got a lot of kickback last year for their Pride sales. But what the people who are kicking back missed, and this is, I think, a corporation that understood their why, is they're also a great company that you can go on website and order a binder for a trans youth. Okay. They can buy it privately online, try it out, figure it out if it's right for them. So there's this public facing thing. There was a huge debacle and had a lot of coverage, but in the background, there's this very quiet kind of counterculture thing going on saying, we are supporting this in a wide way. And I think that's very powerful to really look at those deeper levels of it.
And when Robert was talking, and what you said just led me to speak this as I was thinking it, that to me describes proximity, right? And in all of this, I think that's what we're trying to get companies to understand, is knowing that why will increase proximity. And that will allow you to know that these resources like a trans binder for someone who may be going through that experience is something that can really show connectedness to the community, right? And to employee groups that represent those communities. So I really appreciate you telling that story because I think it's super impactful.
And we have a Q&A section that's open as well too. So if anyone who's listening today has a question that they'd like to bring to the panel, please feel free to put them in there and we'll try and bring them up as time allows. Greg put one in that I think is really important too, is in this current political environment, there are lots of pullbacks on access to healthcare for the LGBTQ community. And how can companies step up and find ways to influence policies and be part of the needed change that should be happening in this world? Like, how do you see potentially that could step forward?
I'd love to jump in on this one just because I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish over the last few weeks, or a couple weeks ago. We spearheaded an effort with our coalition of companies to pen a letter to Congress in relation to the proposed cuts for the HIV infrastructure by the House of Representatives, which totaled over $760 million in cuts. We're talking about HIV funding that has survived several different presidential cabinets, that has largely been a nonpartisan issue, and has recently come under threat. And obviously, we're still not out of the deep end yet, but we are hopefully safe for 2024, and we'll reconvene in 2025 to determine what steps need to be taken to continue that advocacy for the maintenance of those funds moving forward. But that's one of the things that is one of the tenets of our commitments that companies make to be a member of our coalition, is championing innovative public policies, not just for funding, but also policies that increase access to HIV prevention and treatment meds for members of the LGBTQ plus community and other communities, and also modernizing HIV criminalization laws as well. As we sit here with 36 or 37, I believe, states that have seriously antiquated laws as it relates to HIV criminalization. So also thinking about access to PrEP at no cost sharing per ACA mandates, and the companies that are part of this coalition have to take on commitments to review and bolster those health plans, making sure that they're compliant with ADA, so they're not discriminating against people living with HIV on the basis of hiring, firing, promoting, et cetera. Those are just some of the ways that we engage and try and bring companies into the fold from a policy advocacy lens.
And to jump in here too, I think that it's really important to support these organizations that support our community year round, right? There are so many wonderful organizations, especially in the nonprofit world, that we work very closely with at Forge, actually, to ensure that our workflows, our protocols, our documents, our working environment is inclusive and welcoming for the LGBTQ plus community. And they actually provide guidance and advice on how to structure certain questions and documents to ensure that we are supporting this community. And so where I'm going with this is, we have a strong network of organizations just like Outcare Health, where we should really lean in and be able to throw our support behind these organizations that are not afraid to support our community year round. And so I just saw a question or comment pop up where some of these companies go out and support, and especially during Pride Month, but then when they receive any sort of backlash, they start to retreat. That is something that we should hold them accountable for. As tough as it is to say, it's something that within our organizations and our partnerships, we should be able to support those organizations that consistently support our community, and for ones that pull back at the slightest fear of insulting someone's potential belief that the well-being of individuals of our community are not as important as the general population. I think that we need to highlight that and hold those executives accountable, because we're all equal, and at the end of the day, that's the most important message.
Yeah, and can I jump in one more time? Just another point on the healthcare piece, particularly in states where the healthcare of especially children is impacted or being impacted. I think the business community sometimes misses the opportunity to challenge those legislators who consider themselves very economically savvy and aren't particularly focused on the well-being of people. That is actually a competitiveness issue. If you look in the states that pull back healthcare access for women, for LGBT communities, for trans kids, their businesses don't want to locate in those places. It is a competitiveness issue, and business leaders don't talk about it enough. I don't want to locate my business in a place where my kids aren't welcome. And so being more forward and talking about how inclusivity and providing healthcare access are actually things that make your economy grow, and tying it to the economic success of both the businesses and the greater communities in those places, I think is an opportunity for the business community to lean in where we haven't leaned in hard enough before.
Mhm.
And actually one more point too, Megan, sorry, that just jotted another topic is just like when you are applying for a job and being interviewed by that organization, when you go to, say, a healthcare organization, and whether it be for yourself, if you're LGBTQ plus identifying, or a child or a loved one of yours, I always tell people who I'm speaking to, don't be afraid to interview them as well, right? You say that you support the LGBTQ plus community as a behavioral health organization. How? Do you provide trainings to your staff? Do you hire LGBTQ plus identifying clinicians? Do you have certain methodology around the minority stress model, and ensuring that everyone has that baseline knowledge? Really dive into those questions. And I challenge everyone to do that, because it's very easy to slap a logo, to slap our acronym on a website, but it's very difficult to build an infrastructure internally to really bring out quality care and quality results for the community.
And I think you bring up a really good point, Robert, this idea of how do we bring it into all levels of an organization, both external and internal? And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle. But I just realized we've been sitting here talking about pink washing and rainbow washing, all with our own context of what it might mean. And I would be curious if each of you might be able to dig inside and maybe come up with a moment in your lived experience where you saw pink washing happen and it had a negative effect, or just that negative feeling inside of you, a moment where you saw it playing out in real life. Because I think that's an important thing to understand too, the impact it actually has on our community. Robert, I had a feeling you nodded really quick when I said that. So I'm going to throw this your direction.
No, it's on a personal note. There was a clothing store. I lived in New York City for quite some time. And like I said before, I came out later in life, and I was so excited to attend my first Pride event in New York City. And there was a store where I purchased a shirt for Pride. They had all of our logos. It seemed super, super welcoming. And I was so excited to not only purchase something that I was finally to feel comfortable and be my true self in, but support a business that I originally thought was supportive of our community. A few months later, I went back to that clothing store with a friend of mine who also is a part of the community. And we were looking at clothing that maybe didn't align with our genders. And we were given the conversation of, why are you looking in this section? And why are you looking at these certain clothes? And it's why this is such an important topic is this is a prime example of the harm that it does to our community. In organizations that truly do not support our community and are looking for that monetary gain and are taking advantage of our community, it dilutes the significance of the pride flag, our pride symbols, Pride Month, and it takes away from the struggles that we go through on a daily basis, but also for years to achieve marriage equality, being recognized in certain institutions. And once again, I say to these executives and I say to these leaders that if you are not building a organization, and I know Mario hit on this before about that internal versus external, but if you're not building an organization that supports this community, you should not be putting your name or logo next to our Pride logos, because it has significant negative impacts and really dilutes the message that we are really trying to get out there.
Yeah. And I think, Robert, if the best thing they should have asked you is, can I help you? And can I set up a dressing room for you? And those should have been the only two questions that should have showed up in that moment, if that LGBTQ pride affirmative energy was through the entire fabric of the company.
Exactly.
Mhm. Anybody else have one they might like to share of an experience where you saw this happen in real life to you?
I'll just say that it's always difficult to talk about these situations when it's been one of your own employers. And sometimes I take the maybe the toxic positivity approach, but I chalk it up to a bit of ignorance in some ways. But I do know that there was an employer that was supporting a lot of LGBTQ plus issues with their logo. But me personally, even though I was a very high achiever, never felt like I was okay to come out in the environment. As a matter of fact, there was a very toxic homophobic environment, not just within the confines of my own coworkers, but in the confines of who we engage with as customers and collaborators. And it ultimately led to me leaving the field that I was in to pursue the work that I'm doing now, because I really wanted to be able to not only lean into my own truth and the realness of who I am as an individual, but to be able to drive support for groups of people who represented the communities that I'm a part of, that look like me and that were part of these communities. It can have drastic effects. A part of me wishes I had the wherewithal to speak up while I was there, but I didn't. And I would now, of course, but that's growth, right? And yeah, it really can have a damaging effect though on employees. And I think there needs to be culture instituted that really is supportive, and there needs to be checks and balances to make sure that companies are soliciting this kind of information from their employees to make sure that they're not experiencing these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is not my story to tell because I'm not impacted in the same way, but I can say I've bared witness to hearing those stories from my employees. And I think it's important to make space for them to feel comfortable sharing those things in the workplace and saying, this is what happened to me before. This is how I've experienced rainbow washing in my own either workplace or life. So it guides what we do so that we're not engaging in that way. And I think I see my role as really a listener and to bear witness when I can to when it's happening and let that guide how we show up as a company in Pride Month, but all year long.
Mm-hmm. And I'll share a quick experience. And I think for everyone who's listening to understand that each of us have had our own experience. And I will guarantee that although we're sharing one, there have been myriad over the course of our lifetime as openly LGBTQ people. And so for me, I used to work for a large entertainment company, initially as a performer. And as a performer out in the world and on stage, I could be as gay as I wanted to. And it did not matter in one way, shape, form at all to anybody. And then I had the opportunity to move into management, and I thought it was a really cool opportunity. So I took that step and became an entertainment manager for this company. And as I started to walk the hallways, I started hearing this very covert message that it wasn't okay for me to be quite as gay when I had a suit on and was walking the halls of the corporation. Nobody ever said anything overtly, but there were all these energies and these messages that kind of kept telling me to tone it down, to tone it down, to tone it down. Now, I am not that person who tones it down. So I did push back against it. And I worked to really create an environment within my department where it was okay for you to be exactly who you were. But once again, sometimes it's overt policy, but sometimes it's just very covert energies that are around you that say, by the way, you need to tone it down a little bit. And I can't imagine anyone who's part of our community or Megan as a woman listening, knowing that energy is around. And it suppresses us and it can shut us down. And I think that's one of those internal things. Yay, you put a flag next to the logo, but I don't feel you're allowing me to be my fully realized person within the hallways of this company. Okay, let me take a breath there. Oh, I haven't been down that road for a while there. We've talked about this idea, though, of creating internal energy that reflects support. And as someone who goes out and does a lot of training, what I've noticed oftentimes there's a one and done mentality. Yay, we had that training. Now look at us. We can say on our DEI reports that we've had this training and we are that organization. But I want to step a little bit deeper. What do you see as steps? Mario, you said knowing your why, but what are actionable steps that organizations can take, let's say internally to really start to build a more affirming environment in the corporate structure for LGBTQ plus people?
Yeah, so I really appreciate you coming to me for this. And like I said earlier, knowing your why, but also having a plan of commitment no matter what it is. I'm going to give you the example of how we implement the plan for our program because of our focus on HIV. And so members of our coalition take on any of 6 commitments. The first of which being simply leading on HIV, extending our corporate priority and making it a corporate priority to extend our call to action to their networks and sharing that they support the LGBTQ plus community and the issue of HIV and how it impacts the community. And the second one being educating their workers and helping to decrease HIV stigma. And so they're creating brave spaces amongst their workers. This can be done in conjunction with ERG groups, but this can also be lunch and learns and different types of events that they can put on and resources and toolkits that they can provide to their employees, just educating them on HIV awareness, prevention, treatment, et cetera. The third one is, as we talked about earlier, reviewing and bolstering their health benefits plans, making sure that they are covering comprehensively all PrEP, prevention, the medication, the doctor's visits, all of those things, right? Labs, everything. The fourth one we talked about as well, advocating for policy and systems change that affects this community, whether that's HIV or otherwise, right? We talked about all of the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation that exists out there where companies can really have a documented and measurable way to really make sure that they're helping advance meaningful policy to make sure that they're combating that. The fifth one is supporting local communities. We can't do anything without community, right? And we all come from community, and we all are a community. And companies can really use this as an opportunity to lift their brand and think about what they do well as a business. Be innovative, right? Think outside the box, move into the next millennium and really bolster what you do as a company and think about how collaborations can help you do that while also helping to build the infrastructure of the LGBTQ plus community. And so we have some incredible examples of how companies doing that between Uber providing free rides to and from pharmacies. We also have the Match Group family of apps sending push notifications to their users on National HIV Testing Day and other days of importance, sending them free HIV test kits, many of them to communities who had never tested for HIV before, and some really impactful work. And then the last one is obviously putting your money where your mouth is, right? And providing financial support to these community-based organizations that are doing the work, to organizations like OutCare and others that have the ability and have the attention of the community and the trust of the community that can really help to fortify our cause. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I love the focus on local community. I think that is like getting as local as you can. If there are local outreach centers, we've supported the local family pride center that's put on by one of the LGBTQ youth outreach centers here in Madison, where we're located, and getting the dollars to the people doing the work is hugely important. The closer you can get to the work, the farther those dollars go. And then also supporting national organizations like OutCare at the same time. Doing both of those things has been a huge, I think, emotional catalyst too for the whole company to feel like, hey, we're making a difference and are focused on more than just profits, right? We're going to use this for good. I think the other thing is in getting creative, there's a lot of things in this challenging environment that companies can do to support their employees. One of the things that we put into place actually after Roe versus Wade was overturned, but we broadened the policy for folks that are employees that are in states where they can't access care anymore, providing stipends and funding for them to get care out of state and access care where they can for any need. And so that was a broad initiative that just knowing you have that safety net from your employer, that if you can't get care where you are in a remote world, we have folks working for us in all 50 states, knowing that they've got your back. I think more companies thinking creatively about how to make healthcare accessible in a world where it's being taken away. We're going to see a lot of ways that we can support each other, and companies can lead that if they really want to. And the allyship badge is one that I think we shouldn't wear lightly, and really digging in a little bit more to do the best that we can.
No, and Megan, just going off of that, such a great response. And I think we've heard over and over again, representation matters, right? And so even taking a step back, I think what we as a community really need to focus in on, right, is funding and where are these, say, dollars are going in investing in companies and organizations. They really should be a part of their diligence process of when, say, a venture capital or a private equity firm is investing in an organization. One of the things that they should be looking at is this sort of social responsibility. What are they, doing to better the lives of individuals within this community? It's something that I think is easily glossed over, if even looked at by venture capital or private equity firms. And so reinforcing that this is such a important factor when deciding to, say, invest or support an organization, and making sure that these firms that are doing the investing are getting the backing and funds to invest, knowing that they are supporting organizations that are promoting the LGBTQ plus community. And that next step in that waterfall is representation on management committees, board of directors, making sure that either allies or people who identify in this community are getting a seat at the table. Right? Unfortunately, a lot of these decisions and conversations are happening at levels that most individuals don't have access to. So ensuring that we have individuals at the table who truly support this community and know what it means to have a meaningful impact and infrastructure to support this community is so important. And that's one of the great things about Forge Health, is that when I first joined the company and I was hired, I wasn't building out an LGBTQ plus specialty programming, wasn't in my job description, but I always said, this is something that I'm super passionate about, and something that, whether in my job description or not, I am going to help support and make sure that this is pushing forward. And I was given that backing and support from our management team, and being able to partake in building out this programming is enlightening, because I highly doubt that there are many other organizations out there that would be given the support that I was when I first came to Forge Health.
And
Grabbing
I
up
would
your
just,
camera.
I was just going to add to that. I think of all of the things that we just said, I think in order for companies to really be strategic and ensure the success of all of these things, they really need to create a plan similar to the way that companies are good at doing what? Scaling business, right? In order to do that, they usually have a plan. They have scopes. They really make sure that they are nurturing those plans and being strategic about how they reach those goals. And so I think with everything that we just said, there has to be an implementation strategy to make sure that there's success. That includes making sure that they have accountability partners or some way to hold themselves accountable, that they're integrating it into their business's innovation strategy, that they're producing a report card for themselves so that they can determine how well they actually are doing or have done in a given period of time. And then that they assess it and renew it and add new things or delete things that didn't work or should or that they want to work in the future. So I really think that's the thing that we really try and focus on is, yes, you can say that you're doing something, you're committed to health equity, you're committed to DEI, and all of those things. But if you don't have a sound implementation strategy for how you get there and a roadmap and a report card, then it doesn't mean a hill of beans.
And just to piggyback on that very quickly, Mary, it's such a phenomenal point, because one of the things that we have been working on at Forge Health is building out that data infrastructure as well, that allows us to dive into the data that we have to ensure that we are reporting out on clinical outcomes or quality of care while we serve this population. So not only are we able to see on the general population scale, but really diving deeper into our data to ensure that what we are building out, the training that we're providing our frontline staff, is actually effective in providing that quality care for members of the LGBTQ plus community. And once again, if your organization is not taking the time to dedicate resources to building out an infrastructure that supports this, I urge you to really push that envelope and have that honest conversation with your team.
And I want to reverse this conversation for just a moment here too. We've talked about what corporations should be doing, but in some ways we talk about how we as the LGBTQ community or supporters of the community may be the pawns at the behest of these large corporations. And Mario, you talked earlier, these corporations exist because they're designed to make money. So on the other side, as allies, supporters, members of the LGBTQ community, where is our power on putting some pressure towards companies to make these changes happen? What are your thoughts about that?
I have some strong thoughts about it. And I think someone hit on it earlier. I can't remember who it was, but when we talk about going into certain communities, I think you were saying for business owners, but even for us regular people who don't own businesses, when we're thinking about retaining and recruiting top talent, make sure that you are combing through these companies' corporate social responsibility initiatives. Make sure that you are holding them accountable to what they say they're doing. Interview with peers of yours within that company before you accept that role to make sure that what they say they do, they actually do, and they're living by those values that they've stated for themselves. So I think as a community, we have a responsibility. We are strong, we are big in number, and we are some of the most talented and gifted individuals there are out there. And so when we're taking on these roles, we need to make sure that we're holding companies accountable from the beginning and doing that assessment work.
Yeah, and just to jump in really quickly too, I think one of the easiest signs to when you're applying for that new role or new job at an organization is, are they asking the right questions in their application process, right? For organizations to make that change, that in an application for a more inclusive environment typically doesn't bring in those dollars that they're seeking. So if they are really making changes at that level, typically that's a good sign in that they're having conversations to ensure that they are attracting talent across all different communities.
And I would also add to that, push the boundaries, right? Like, ask the tough questions. Why are you doing this work? We appreciate that you're doing it, but why does it matter to you? And maybe head off some of the attempts at or the abilities for rainbow washing and pink washing by saying, if this does happen, what would be your sayings? I've literally left the company over the George Floyd situation, and that was my personal choice. But I felt like the company wasn't doing enough. An announcement wasn't enough for me, right? And I wanted to hold them accountable because I knew I had value to that company. And I wanted to let them know that it was important for me for them to stand up and for people that look like me in that situation. And so I think we wield an incredible amount of influence. And so I think holding our employers and the employee force accountable is another way that we can go about it.
Any thoughts, Megan?
Yeah, again, I think about this from the perspective of an ally who's made mistakes before. And I think the thing that drives me to always try to be better and to be a better ally is the real feedback that I get from my colleagues, from my customers, from my kids. Mom, you're not supposed to say it that way. Or Mom, I need you to think about this a little bit differently. And the feedback, and if you're in an environment that is an actual allyship environment, that feedback is welcomed and encouraged and asked for and then responded to. And I think for other maybe allies that are on the phone that are trying to do it well, being open to hearing when you do it wrong and then correcting yourself in the future, whether it's a policy or the way you address someone in a meeting or the way that you address an issue publicly, if it doesn't land right and it's not serving people well, being open to changing your perspective.
I have to add one more thing. I think that's amazing, Megan. If you are a member of an employee resource group, actually be a resource to that group. Your role is to be an advocate. Your role is to build brave spaces for community, to allow people the opportunity to show up in ways more authentic than they traditionally would if that didn't exist. And I often sometimes see employee resource groups only exist to climb the corporate ladder, but they don't think about how they're bringing up all of the members of that group and the members that will come behind them after they have long left those places of employment. And these employee resource groups do great work in many facets, but I do see a lot of gaps when it comes to advocating for and building brave spaces for the members of those communities and those groups. Be a resource.
And since we're getting close to time, there's a question that I always like to close us with. We've had this conversation about where we're at, where we've been, but I would want to say for you, what do you envision as an empowered future for corporate support of the LGBTQ community going forward? What would be your beautiful vision of the future for this subject?
I would certainly like to see a lot more LGBTQ funded businesses and CEOs in seats so that we could have a much broader, bigger panel in years to come of folks from the community leading companies and hopefully venture-backed companies that can really shape this conversation in ways that I'm not able to. And so that would be my biggest hope.
I would say my biggest hope is similar in the way that we would see a lot more promotion of LGBTQ plus members, but also policies that create safety for the members of the LGBTQ plus community, internally and externally facing policies. And I think there's lots of opportunities. And I think, again, we need to be committed to creating actionable plans to get there.
Yeah, Megan, Mario, you hit the nail on the head. What I envision is a place where we're not viewed in this silo, and that really understanding that to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community is really a culture, right? And so while you can acknowledge the uniqueness of our culture and something that, we enjoy being a part of, viewing us just as any other individual, right? And while it may be one aspect of our life, it doesn't define us in totality. And just in any other case, when you come to a doctor and you have, say, a presenting issue, you take into account all things. Are you sleeping well? Does your back hurt? Do you have headaches? It's just a part of myself, but it doesn't define entirely who I am. And I can be a part of many other different communities as also being a gay man.
I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to speak with us and our audience today. It's just been such an honor to sit with your wisdom and your lived experience. And that's what I love these conversations. I think we all get to learn together in this process. I want to invite you all to join us next month when we're going to be turning our attention to OBGYN care for LGBTQ plus patients and how we can create welcoming spaces regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. So that'll be taking place on April 18th, 3 o'clock West Coast time, 6 o'clock East Coast time, every place in between. You can register at outcarehealth.org. And today's recording, as well as all of our previous recordings, are available on outcarehealth.org/outtalk. Yes, I remembered it. Yay, me. So once again, I want to thank you all. And I didn't tell you, but my season is winter. I know I'm one of those people who likes to put on big sweaters and comforters and sit in front of a fireplace with a good book. So all of my summers, go out and play. It'll be here before you know it. And once again, thank you all for joining us today. Take care.